Hey guys, welcome back to a new video. Today we're gonna dive a bit deeper into the helicopters in Delta Force and especially on how to fly them. I know that the controls are terrible right now and that for this reason most players probably stay away from helis, but there are a few things you can do to still turn this into a better experience. I'm not an absolute ace pilot myself like some other players are, but I learned a few things here and there in Battlefield 2042 but also in Delta Force, and I thought I'm gonna share them with you. And the first step that I would recommend at least is to take a look at the settings. So at keyboard and mouse you should turn off invert vertical aircraft controls. This is for some reason different from the former playtests where you had to turn it on to have the same effect, but now you have to turn it off. And this might be what keeps you from getting a feel for the controls, because it's basically inverted compared to the soldier controls. And when you get into a heli for the first time with this setting turned on, you will very likely crash your heli. Further down the list you can then find the sensitivity for vehicle third and first person view, and here you have to try out what works for you. I upped the third person sensitivity a little bit from 5 to 6 to be able to react faster when flying, but I lowered the first person sensitivity to 4 so I'm able to aim more precisely. On the graphics and field of view I would also recommend to change the vehicle third person FOV, and here you can go all the way up to the maximum. This will show you a lot more of your surroundings and you can see a lot more where you are actually flying. Now what you can do as well, but what I didn't do myself, is to swap the key bindings of roll and yaw, which means you set roll to A and D and yaw to moving the mouse left and right. The advantage of this is that you can aim a lot more precisely with your mouse and it will actually feel a lot more like aiming as infantry. And I know that a lot of ace pilots use this setting, but for me personally I got used to flying with the default keybinds over the years, and when I switch them up I just crash every helicopter. You can try it out and see what works better for you, but it's just something that I wanted to include as another possible option, but it's not necessarily something that will make flying easier. Quite the opposite, at least in my opinion. If you want to go full heli and you want to get really good at flying though, this setting might be the better option for you. For the normal players who just want to be able to fly without crashing, I think this setting is not to be recommended. Once you're done with the settings, you should go to the drill mode first, so the PvE mode where you only play against AI, because here you will have constant access to vehicles and no one else is sitting in the spawn screen waiting for them. Plus, the enemy bots are usually not so much after your heli as normal players, because once you appear in a heli in a normal multiplayer match, be ready to have the whole enemy team and their vehicles firing at you. So you should at least know how to evade a few bullets and how to use your vehicle's upgrades. And PvE is the perfect way to train this. So the controls in general are pretty easy. W and S control the throttle, so with the W button you accelerate and go faster into the direction the rotor is heading, and in this case here I ascend, and with S you slow down the rotor, which means you slow down the speed of the heli, so in this case I descend. The A and D buttons are responsible to turn the heli left and right, but without rolling it, and the Q and E button and the mouse are responsible for the movement of the heli around its rotor, so the rolling. And with the inverted settings turned off, this means when moving the mouse away from you, the heli's nose goes upwards, so you look up, and when moving the mouse towards you, the nose goes downwards, so you look down, just like when you play infantry. And when moving the mouse left and right or using Q and E, the heli rolls left and right. With the mouse a bit slower, with the keys a little bit faster. So if you want to fly straight forward, for example, you just move your nose down a bit, and if you want to fly faster, you also accelerate. And if you want to move backwards, you move the nose upwards. So far to the basic controls. Now, the only thing you need to do is to put all of this together and combine it to be able to move around buildings and dodge incoming bullets and rockets. And this is also what I would specifically recommend to practice in the drill mode. Get a feel for how long it takes to change altitudes, for how fast the helicopters will react to your input, because these reaction times are different between the two helicopters we have right now. How close can you move to the ground, how to maneuver between buildings without crashing, how to quickly turn and move in circles around an objective. And specifically in the attack heli, I would also recommend to learn how to quickly switch seats from pilot to gunner and vice versa, because most of the time you won't have a gunner with you and you might have to do both jobs yourself. Now, some general things and tips to piloting a helicopter in Delta Force. First of all, we have two of them at the moment. One is the assault heli that is more heavyweight and sluggish and reacts a lot slower to your inputs, but it has an additional gunner seat, like I already mentioned, and this one can be really powerful if you have a gunner. And the other one is the recon helicopter, which is very lightweight and nimble and actually my personal favorite, but it's also more vulnerable and doesn't have the same firepower. So what are you doing once you learned how to fly without crashing? Well, for the most part, you want to support your team, which means you need map knowledge and need to observe the match to check where your team needs air support. But what's important is that you plan your moves a little bit and keep an eye on enemy vehicles, especially on the LAV, because these ones are your worst enemy. It can deal quite some damage to you with its cannons and missiles, and it can fire across the whole map with high precision. They are also hard to counter since they usually have a sixth sense for incoming helis and already start shooting at you in the moment you spawn. So to go against them, you have to be really stealthy and hide behind hills or buildings as long as possible, and then just quickly come out for an attack. What's beneficial for you in this case is that the map boundaries for aircraft are a lot bigger compared to the ones for infantry and ground vehicles. So on most maps you are able to get behind some distant buildings, for example on Threshold, or you can fly behind the hills on Cracked or Ascension. The only problem is that the boundaries for helis are not shown on the minimap, so you have to figure out by yourself how far you can go. Now, when you are flying close to the ground like you will do in these situations, I would recommend to mainly maneuver with the A and D keys, otherwise you might end up rolling over the ground instead of in the air. And to keep your altitude, you just have to carefully tap W and S to keep the heli as close to the ground as possible. Once you start your attack, whether it is on a vehicle or an objective, you need to be prepared for two things. First of all, you will get damage from normal bullets or vehicle cannons, and you will very likely get a lock-on warning. So either a vehicle or infantry is trying to get you down with a missile. Now, for these lock-ons, you can counter them with your flares, but do not pop them too early, because when you only see the yellow lock-on message, there is no missile in the air yet. So you still have about 2 seconds to get behind cover. But once the message turns red and says missile incoming, you go for your flares. And they will pop out for a few seconds, and as long as they do this, no one can lock onto you again. So this gives you a short time frame to get behind cover or at least away from the danger. I would always recommend to fly towards your HQ and then wait for your flares to come back from cooldown. This is especially important for the recon helicopter since it's a lot more vulnerable, so don't fly around out there without your flares ready. Because once you got damage, either from bullets or from missiles, this whole flying thing is not getting easier. Because the more damage you take, the slower and harder your heli is to handle. Because some parts of it, like the rotor, will start to break, which slows you down. So here's another tip I can give you. When you plan to get into a heli or a vehicle in general, always use an engineer operator. They have a repair tool, and this means once you got damaged, you can land somewhere in the back of the map and repair your heli from the outside. Because with the emergency repair upgrade, you can always only repair a few % at once. What's not possible in Delta Force is to use the repair tool in one of the open passenger seats, so you cannot quickly switch and repair the heli from the inside or place a friend in your heli who's constantly repairing you. You need to land and get out, then you can repair the heli from the outside. What you can do though is to use the vehicle repair stations to fully restore your heli's health within only a few seconds. However, this is a bit tricky since you need to land right next to them, and this needs a bit of practice, because the whole landing mechanic in general is still terrible, and even though you are on the ground, the heli still moves and sometimes tips over. Or you still take damage even though you did land as softly as possible. So this is really something you have to practice a few times before you master it. Now, let's imagine all of the enemy vehicles are gone and you want to support your team at an objective. Here again, map knowledge really comes in handy, because you have to find the right spot where enemies usually are or where they might be coming from. And here it's helpful when you can circle around an objective but without losing your focus on it. So what you need here is a good combination of roll, yaw and throttle. So let's say you want to go around the right side. You have to roll the heli a little to the right and then keep aiming at the objective with A and D. But at the same time you also have to adjust your altitude to not crash into the ground or an obstacle or a building. And then when you found someone, you can simply switch to first person view by toggling the right mouse button. When you toggle it again, you will have another zoom state, gauge, which is also very helpful, especially when engaging with infantry, and when you toggle again, you're back in third person. In case you want to fly in third person permanently, you can also switch it with C. What Delta Force doesn't have though is an option to freely look around your heli to check for attackers or other aircraft. You always have to turn the vehicle with you, but what you can do is to quickly switch the camera to rear view by holding the V button. This way you can at least check what's going on behind you. So if you want to learn how to fly, check your settings, practice a little against bots, and then be patient in normal multiplayer matches. Learn to read the maps and the game, stay behind cover, plan your attacks carefully, and always keep an eye on the enemy LAV and where it is located. And that was it for today. I think this should cover most of the basics you need to fly a helicopter in Delta Force. And if you have any questions or want me to get more into detail about something specific, let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. I'm the Catwoman, and you are awesome.